So the Nintendo Wii turns 10 years old today, and that means one thing: I'm getting kind of old. I remember specifically picking up that system, what games I got, what sort of experiences I had, and the Nintendo Wii was a really good system in my opinion. It unfortunately has a stigma of being, a soccer mom console with a lot of shovelware, and that is true to some extent, but the Nintendo Wii is probably Nintendo's most underrated system of all time. So in this video, I just wanted to share with you guys my first impressions of the Wii when I first got it, what I thought about the games, and then just kind of show you guys that the Wii is a great system. There are so many great titles on this system, revived franchises, revived genres, new franchises, brand new IPs, that it really deserves a lot of credit and it really deserves more positive speaking in the gaming world. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about the Nintendo Wii. So I remember picking up my Wii at launch. I believe it was a midnight launch, and I got a couple games with it. I took off like 3 or 4 days of work, and I got, I believe I got Tony Hawk Downhill Jam, Excite Truck, Red Steel, and of course Twilight Princess. And I remember being disappointed with Red Steel. I thought it was pretty cool. The graphics were actually pretty decent because essentially, the Wii was a beefed up GameCube. And it wasn't that huge generational gap like the PS2 to PS3, the Xbox to the Xbox 360, where you could definitely see an increase and an improvement in graphics. It was a little bit harder to find those sort of increased graphics on the Wii, but they were good, they were satisfactory. And the Wii is actually what brought me back into hardcore gaming. That generation, the GameCube, PS2, Xbox era, I was in high school, I was doing a lot of different stuff, so I wasn't playing games quite as much. And so I was 21 at the time of the release of the Wii, and that's what really brought me back in. And I remember that Twilight Princess, I put about 50 hours in those 3 or 4 days and beat the game because it was just such an amazing game. I really enjoyed it, and I really thought, wow, if this is what the Wii is going to offer me, this is good. This is what I'm looking forward to. And of course, the Wii came with Wii Sports. And those types of games are what the system is remembered for. The party games, the soccer moms buying the Wii just to play Wii Sports and nothing else. And of course shovelware, because as successful as the Wii was, there was a ton of shovelware on the system. Companies saw a market where they could say, hey, we got soccer moms playing, we've got, their daughters playing. Let's just put out these terrible games that just try to appeal to them. And unfortunately, the Wii had a ton of shovelware. There's no denying that, but every system has shovelware. You can look at any system since the dawn of time and there's shovelware on it. So to categorize the Wii just as, a shovelware system is totally unfair and pretty ridiculous in my opinion. So after, playing those initial games on the Wii, I always would collect for the Wii, it seemed like. I did have a PS3, I did have an Xbox 360, and I would play those games, but I always was excited about new Wii products Wii games because, I don't know, it was just such an interesting system, and there were so many possibilities that developers could do. And I guess one of the reasons, looking back in hindsight, I really liked the Wii was because it was obviously cheaper to develop for than the Xbox 360 and the PS3. There was a huge generational gap. That was the introduction to HD gaming with the PS2 to PS3, Xbox to Xbox 360. That brought in HD gaming. Meanwhile, the Wii was not an HD system. So developers didn't have to put as much money and resources into these games because they were pretty much, like I said, it's a beefed up GameCube. So you weren't really doing a huge generational gap in terms of graphics. And I think that actually helped the Wii in the long run. I know some of those games would have looked much better with HD graphics, but I honestly feel like the lower cost of development for the Wii is why there were so many awesome Wii games. And, the Wii brought back franchises that I never thought I'd see again. You look at something like Knights. Knights, of course, was a Sega Saturn hit. It was one of the best games on the Saturn, and they made Knight's Journey of Dreams on the Wii. And I never thought I would see another Knights game again, so I was really excited for it. And yes, it did have the tacked on motion controls, and a lot of games did sort of tack on motion controls and maybe it didn't make the game any better, but if you plugged in a classic controller, that game was butter smooth. It wasn't as great as the original Knights, but it was still a good game. You can even look towards Nintendo themselves as bringing back genre, or bringing back, game franchises. With Excite, you had the Excite truck game that I mentioned that I had picked up earlier. You hadn't seen Excite, any Excite game since Excite Bike on the NES, so it was nice to see that again. You also had Donkey Kong return in a standard 2D format, that Super Nintendo style of gameplay. You didn't have that on the GameCube. You didn't have that on the N64. So it was great to see that return. You also had lesser known ones, a Klonoa remake, A Boy and His Blob. There was just so many games that showed up on the Wii and you were like, well, what's that doing on there? But I would always buy them because those were the games that sparked my interest. Those were the games that I thought were really cool. And you wouldn't see this on the PS3. You wouldn't see this on the Xbox 360. So that's what made the system unique. You also had, a genre come back. That being the light gun game. The Wii remote was essentially a zapper. So, you would just point it at the screen, zap, 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 zap. And it made light gun games come back. You had Dead Space and Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles 1 and 2, which were, sort of light gun / adventure games, but they were really fun, and it was a way to put these franchises on the Wii. You also had Sega coming out with a bunch of awesome games. You had Ghost Squad, you had House of the Dead 2 and 3 compilation disc, and you had House of the Dead Overkill. And Ghost Squad and House of the Dead 2 and 3 were both budget games. When they came out, I believe they were only $30. And so it was like a no-brainer. It was like, okay, do you like arcade games? Do you like arcade-style games? Do you want an online leaderboard? Here, check out this game. And it was just so much fun. I just loved light gun games. And of course, you had all the stupid peripherals that came along with it. But as far as just getting those games, it was so easy. It was so easy to get into. Anyone could play a light gun game. They're fun. There's tons of replay value. So I was very impressed at how the Wii brought back that genre. Because, it was a very underrated genre. You also have to look at the Wii's Virtual Console. The Wii's Virtual Console is light years ahead of the Wii U's Virtual Console, and that's a fact. You had NES, Super NES, N64, you had imports, TurboGrafx-16, Game Gear, Master System, Genesis, you had arcade games, you had unreleased in the United States games. There was so much stuff on just the Virtual Console side. That's not even putting into effect the original titles for it. Remember the Rebirth series? You had Contra Rebirth, Castlevania Rebirth. Those were awesome exclusive games to the Wii. And nobody talks about them. Nobody talks about how good the Virtual Console was. I guess because the online component of the Wii was definitely a few steps behind, the competition at the time. It was definitely more of a PS2 online system than a PS3, and the PS3 was of course already out. But that's not to say that there weren't online games on the Wii, because there were some actually really good first-person shooters that, once again, nobody talks about. First-person shooters are, a huge genre now, and they really got their foothold, I feel, in the late PS2 to PS3 era as, a dominant franchise. You had games like The Conduit and The Conduit 2, both which had online multiplayer, and both had a solid single player. Call of Duty fans, you had Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, you had a Black Ops on there, and yeah, the graphics were dumbed down, but I felt the controls actually added to those games with the motion controls, because it just seemed a little bit easier. Once you got the feel for it, you could dominate with those motion controls, and it was fun. You even had Medal of Honor Heroes, which had 32-player online. 32-player online. You don't even see that in PS4 or Xbox One games now. And it's crazy because the Wii did it, and that was an early title in the Wii's library. So it was very impressive. You had brand new IPs on the Wii. You had games like, you had Mad World. You had Zack and Wiki, which was a criminally underrated game. You had new franchises from Nintendo with Xenoblade. Oh, I forgot one of the games that was brought back that a franchise, Sin and Punishment. Who would have thought a Sin and Punishment game would have been on the system? So there's a lot of good stuff on the Wii. If you're a fan of mature games and horror games, tons of them. You had Obscura, you had Silent Hill, Shattered Memories, you had Resident Evil 4 with the improved controls, you had the Resident Evil archives that had Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 Remake on there. You of course had the aforementioned Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, you had strange Japanese horror games, and games like, The Calling, Ju-On the Grudge. It was just a diverse system. People like to pigeonhole it and say it wasn't a diverse system. And that's not true. That's just simply not true. But when you look at the library, you look at the genre of games, there's so many different games. There's so many different gameplay experiences. Of course, then they added the Wii Motion Plus for games like Red Steel 2, which was a big contrast from the original Red Steel, but it was a fun game because you had much more accurate controls and a stylized graphical style. Sega was releasing, you know, game after game, just crazy games, and it was good. It was a great system. And of course, finally, you have Nintendo. Some of Nintendo's best games of recent memory came out on this system. You had Super Mario Galaxy, you had New Super Mario Brothers. Like, those were awesome. Super Mario Galaxy are some of the best Super Mario games. I would put them ahead of the Wii U versions of that we got Super Mario games of. You had the aforementioned Donkey Kong. You had 2 brand new Zelda games with Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy, and that's what you got. And it was such a good system. You had Xenoblade, which was, you know, brand new, a new Nintendo franchise. Imagine a Nintendo world without Xenoblade. So it's a shame. It's a shame how people don't respect the Wii, because the Wii deserves your respect. The Wii, top to bottom, the bottom sucks, but the top and the mid is just so good on the Wii. There's so many hidden gems on there. I will do a hidden gems video on the Wii one day, but I just wanted to talk about the system because it's its 10th birthday, and that's pretty monumental in my opinion. The Wii, for better or worse, really changed gaming. And if motion controls suck so bad, Sony, Microsoft, you know, PlayStation Move, Kinect, come on guys. I don't really miss motion controls, but I think the Wii has its place in gaming history. The Wii is Nintendo's most underrated system because nobody talks about it in a positive light. Let me know what you think of the Nintendo Wii in the comments section down below. Let me know if you want to see that Wii Hidden Gems video as well. Make sure you check out other videos on the channel. Be sure to subscribe, and if you really like seeing my face, check out my Patreon. I'll catch you guys next time. Later.